In the vast expanse of the Galactic Council's archives, buried beneath millions of battle reports, diplomatic transcripts, and trade agreements, lies a single recording that would reshape the universe's understanding of humanity forever. It wasn't recorded by a decorated admiral or a celebrated war hero. It wasn't captured during humanity's greatest victories or most publicized campaigns. Instead, this 37-minute and 14-second recording came from the personal combat suit of Engineer Third Class Maya Chen, a girl so unremarkable that most of her shipmates couldn't remember her name until the day she saved them all. The recording begins with static, the soft hum of recycled air, and Maya's quiet breathing as she performs routine maintenance in the depths of the UES Defiance. What follows is raw, unfiltered humanity at its most desperate and magnificent, a species that refuses to surrender even when surrender is the only logical choice. Within hours of its release, this recording would be translated into every known galactic language. Within days, it would spark riots on 12 different worlds. Within months, it would fundamentally alter how every alien civilization viewed the small, stubborn species from Sol 3. This is not just Maya's story. This is the moment the galaxy learned what it truly means to be human. The recording begins now. Maya Chen had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. At 23, she had perfected the art of being unremarkable, keeping her head down, speaking only when spoken to, and completing her engineering duties with efficient silence aboard the United Earthship Defiance. While other crew members gathered in the mess hall sharing stories and laughter, Maya preferred the humming solitude of the engine compartments, where the steady rhythm of plasma conduits and fusion reactors provided a comforting soundtrack to her work. The Defiance was humanity's newest deep space exploration vessel, tasked with mapping the outer rim of the Kepler sector, a region of space considered so desolate and worthless that even the expansionist Zephyrian Empire had dismissed it as unworthy of colonization. Captain Morrison had handpicked his crew from the best Earth had to offer: decorated veterans, brilliant scientists, and experienced diplomats. Maya had made the roster purely through technical competence, scoring perfect marks on every engineering examination despite her complete lack of social connections or political influence. She spent her days in the lower decks, maintaining the maze of systems that kept 300 souls alive in the hostile vacuum of space. The fusion reactors hummed their constant song, the atmospheric processors whispered their endless cycle of purification, and the gravity generators maintained their invisible field that kept everyone's feet planted firmly on the deck plates. Maya knew every bolt, every circuit, every microscopic flaw in the ship's superstructure. She could navigate the maintenance tunnels blindfolded and had personally calibrated each of the 743 sensors that monitored the ship's vital functions. Her colleagues respected her work but rarely sought her company. Chief Engineer Rodriguez valued her efficiency and gave her the most complex assignments, trusting her to solve problems that stumped more senior staff. Security Chief Williams nodded politely when their paths crossed in the corridors. Even Captain Morrison had once complimented her work during a formal inspection, though he had consulted his tablet to remember her name. Maya preferred it this way. She had tried being social once, during her first assignment aboard a transport vessel. Her enthusiasm for discussing plasma dynamics and quantum fluctuations had earned her the nickname Circuit Girl and ensured she ate most of her meals alone. She had learned that most people found her passion for engineering either boring or intimidating, and that her tendency to solve problems with technical solutions rather than interpersonal diplomacy made her an awkward presence in social situations. So she retreated into her work, finding satisfaction in the elegant complexity of starship systems and the meditative rhythm of routine maintenance. Her personal quarters were Spartan regulation furniture, a few technical manuals, and a single photograph of her parents standing proudly outside the Shanghai Engineering Academy on the day she graduated summa cum laude at age 19. The morning that would change everything began like any other. Maya's alarm chimed softly at 0600 ship time, precisely 7 minutes before the corridor lights began their gradual brightening cycle. She showered quickly in the small hygiene compartment, dressed in her regulation blue engineering coveralls, and made her way to the mess hall for a quick breakfast of reconstituted protein and synthetic coffee. The mess hall buzzed with the usual morning conversations. Lieutenant Parker was regaling a table of junior officers with an embellished account of his shore leave exploits on Titan Station. Dr. Reyes was explaining the finer points of xenobiology to anyone who would listen. Communications Officer Zhang was quietly reading dispatches from Earth while nursing her second cup of coffee. Maya collected her meal and found an empty table near the viewport, where she could watch the stars while slowly past as the ship continued its survey mission. She ate methodically while reviewing the day's maintenance schedule on her personal tablet. 3 routine inspections, a recalibration of the portside maneuvering thrusters, and a complete diagnostic of the backup life support systems, a full but manageable workload. She was finishing her coffee when the ship's intercom crackled to life. "All hands, this is the captain. We have detected what appears to be a derelict vessel at coordinates 77 Mark 42. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. All other personnel continue normal duties until further notice." The mess hall erupted in excited chatter. A derelict ship was an exciting discovery in any circumstances, but finding one in this supposedly empty sector of space raised intriguing questions. Maya gathered her dishes and headed for the engineering deck, knowing that whatever they found would likely require her expertise eventually. The next few hours passed in routine maintenance work, but Maya could feel the ship's excitement through its systems. The engines increased their output slightly as Captain Morrison adjusted course toward the mysterious contact. The sensor arrays hummed with increased activity as Science Officer Torres conducted detailed scans. Even the artificial gravity seemed to pulse with anticipation, though Maya knew that was impossible. Gravity generators didn't work that way. It was during her afternoon break that the first warning signs appeared. Maya was in Engineering Bay 7, a small compartment deep in the ship's belly that housed the primary sensor junction boxes. She had been troubleshooting an intermittent signal degradation in the long-range communications array when she noticed something odd in the power consumption readings. The ship's standard background systems were drawing more power than usual, not much, perhaps 5% above normal, but enough to catch her attention. Maya pulled up the detailed power distribution charts on her tablet and began tracing the anomaly through the ship's electrical grid. The excess draw seemed to be coming from multiple sources: environmental systems, sensor arrays, even the food processors were consuming slightly more energy than their specifications indicated they should. Maya frowned and cross-referenced the power consumption data with the ship's maintenance logs. Nothing had changed recently, no new equipment installed, no systems modifications, no component failures that would explain the increased power draw. She made a note to investigate further and continued her work on the communications array. By 1400 hours, the Defiance had closed to within scanner range of the derelict vessel. Maya could hear the excitement in the voices echoing through the corridors as crew members discussed the preliminary findings. The alien ship was massive, nearly twice the length of the Defiance, and constructed from materials that didn't match any known galactic civilizations. More mysteriously, it appeared to be completely inactive: no power signatures, no life signs, no response to communication attempts. Maya was recalibrating a plasma coupling when her tablet chimed with an urgent message from Chief Rodriguez. "Chen, I need you in the main engineering section immediately. We're seeing some unusual readings that require your analysis." Maya secured her tools and made her way through the ship's corridors to the main engineering deck. The central command center was bustling with activity as technicians monitored the ship's systems while preparing for what would likely be a boarding mission to investigate the alien vessel. Chief Rodriguez was standing before the main status display, his weathered face creased with concern. "Chen, take a look at these power consumption reports. Something's not adding up." Maya approached the display and immediately recognized the same anomaly she had noticed earlier, but now it was more pronounced. The ship's overall power consumption had increased by nearly 8% over normal baseline levels, with the excess draw distributed across multiple systems throughout the vessel. "I noticed this earlier during routine maintenance," Maya said, pulling up her own readings on the nearest workstation. "It started small, but it's been increasing steadily over the past 6 hours." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of. Run a full diagnostic on all primary systems. I want to know what's causing this before we get any closer to that derelict." Maya set to work immediately, her fingers flying across the control interfaces as she initiated comprehensive system scans. The ship's vast network of sensors and monitors began reporting their status in real time, generating streams of data that would have overwhelmed most engineers. Maya absorbed it all, her mind automatically sorting and categorizing the information while looking for patterns that might explain the anomaly. The diagnostic results were troubling. Every major ship system was operating within normal parameters, yet somehow the overall power consumption continued to climb. It was as if something was drawing energy from the ship without triggering any of the monitoring systems designed to detect such intrusions. "Chief," Maya said quietly, "I think we need to consider the possibility that something external is affecting our systems." Rodriguez turned to face her, his expression grave. "What kind of external influence?" Maya hesitated, knowing how her next words would sound. "I can't be certain, but the power drain pattern suggests some kind of scanning or probing activity. Something might be studying our ship's systems remotely." "The derelict?" "It's possible. If they have technology we don't understand, they could be conducting passive scans that our sensors can't detect directly. We're only noticing it through the secondary effect on our power consumption." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering the implications. "How confident are you in this assessment?" Maya looked at the data streaming across her workstation one more time, double-checking her calculations and conclusions. 92% certainty, based on the available evidence. That's good enough for me. Come with me, we need to brief the captain immediately. As they made their way to the bridge, Maya felt a familiar knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She would have to present her findings to the ship's senior staff, explain her reasoning to people who might question her conclusions or dismiss her concerns. But the data was clear, and her duty was to report what she had found regardless of her personal comfort level. The bridge of the Defiance was a study in controlled tension. Captain Morrison stood before the main view screen, studying the visual representation of the alien derelict ship that hung motionless against the backdrop of distant stars. The vessel was indeed massive, its dark hull reflecting the weak light of the system's distant sun in a way that suggested materials unknown to human science. Science Officer Torres was coordinating detailed scans from her station, directing the ship's sensor arrays to gather as much information as possible about the mysterious vessel. Navigation Officer Kumar was maintaining a careful distance, ready to take evasive action if the situation changed. Security Chief Williams was reviewing tactical options, though what those might be against such an unknown quantity remained unclear. "Captain," Rodriguez called out as they entered the bridge. "I need to report a potential security concern." Morrison turned to face them, his gray eyes immediately focusing on Maya. "Proceed, Chief." Rodriguez gestured for Maya to step forward. "Engineer Chen has identified an anomalous power drain that may indicate we're being scanned by unknown technology." Maya felt every pair of eyes on the bridge turn toward her. She cleared her throat and began her report, keeping her voice steady and professional despite her nervousness. "Sir, beginning approximately 6 hours ago, I detected a gradual increase in the ship's overall power consumption. The pattern is consistent with external scanning or probing activity, though our sensors show no direct evidence of such scans." Captain Morrison's expression remained neutral. "Explain your reasoning, engineer." Maya activated her tablet and projected the power consumption data onto the bridge's secondary display screen. Normal ship operations require a baseline power draw that's very predictable. Any deviation usually indicates equipment failure, system modifications, or external interference. In this case, all our systems are operating normally, yet we're consuming 8% more power than we should be. She highlighted specific sections of the data as she continued. The excess draw is distributed across multiple ship systems in a pattern that suggests something is actively probing our technological capabilities. Each system experiences a brief spike in power consumption, as if responding to an external query, then returns to normal levels while the scanning process moves to the next system. Science Officer Torres leaned forward in her chair. "Could this be some kind of passive scanning technology? Something that doesn't emit detectable energy signatures but somehow stimulates our systems to reveal information about their operation?" Maya nodded. "That's my assessment. It's theoretically possible to gather detailed information about technological systems by inducing microfluctuations in their power consumption and analyzing the response patterns. We've never encountered anything like it before, but the principles are sound." Captain Morrison was quiet for several seconds, processing the implications. "If your assessment is correct, Engineer Chen, what does this tell us about whoever built that derelict?" "That they possess technology significantly more advanced than ours, sir." The sophistication required to conduct this type of scanning without detection suggests capabilities we haven't even theorized yet. The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated this revelation. They had approached the derelict assuming it was abandoned, perhaps the remnant of some long-dead civilization. The possibility that it was actively studying them changed everything. "Recommendations, Chief Rodriguez?" Morrison asked. "I suggest we maintain our current distance while Chen continues monitoring the scanning activity. If we can understand how they're doing this, we might be able to develop countermeasures." Morrison nodded slowly. "Very well. Engineer Chen, I want continuous reports on any changes in the scanning pattern. Science Officer Torres, coordinate with engineering to see if we can detect these scans directly. Everyone else, maintain standard alert status but be prepared for anything." As the senior staff returned to their duties, Maya felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. Her technical expertise had been recognized and valued, but she was now responsible for monitoring what could be humanity's first contact with a truly advanced alien civilization. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders as she returned to the engineering deck. The next several hours passed in intense concentration as Maya refined her monitoring systems and worked with Torres to develop new scanning protocols that might detect the alien technology directly. The power drain continued its steady pattern, moving systematically through the ship's various systems like an incredibly patient and thorough investigator. As her shift neared its end, Maya made one final check of the monitoring systems before turning the watch over to the night shift. The alien scanning had become more focused, concentrating on the ship's defensive systems and strategic capabilities. Whatever intelligence lay behind that dark hull, it was learning everything it needed to know about human technology and military capabilities. Maya filed her final report and headed to her quarters, unaware that this would be the last normal evening of her life. Tomorrow would bring revelations that would test everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy, and her own quiet existence would be shattered forever. But tonight, she was still just Maya Chen, the quiet engineer who noticed things others missed, whose technical expertise was valued but whose person remained largely invisible to her crewmates. She had no way of knowing that her careful observations and detailed analysis were about to become the foundation for humanity's survival in a universe far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. As she drifted off to sleep, the alien scanning continued its methodical exploration of human technology, gathering the intelligence it would need for what was to come. Maya's sleep was interrupted by the general alarm at 0347 hours. The piercing wail of the emergency klaxon cut through her dreams like a blade, instantly snapping her to full consciousness. She rolled out of her bunk and reached for her emergency kit before her feet hit the deck plates, muscle memory taking over as she dressed in her duty uniform with practiced efficiency. The corridor outside her quarters was filled with crew members moving with urgent purpose. The emergency lighting cast everything in a harsh red glow, and the ship's intercom crackled with status reports from various departments. Maya made her way toward the engineering section, fighting against the flow of personnel heading to their emergency stations. "All hands, this is Captain Morrison," the intercom announced. "The contact vessel has just activated and is approaching our position. All departments report readiness status immediately." This is not a drill. Maya's blood turned cold. The derelict wasn't derelict after all, it had been studying them while pretending to be inactive, gathering intelligence about human technology and capabilities. Her monitoring of the power anomalies had been correct, but apparently incomplete. She hadn't detected the activation because there had been no activation, the alien vessel had been awake and aware the entire time. She reached the main engineering deck to find controlled chaos. Chief Rodriguez was coordinating damage control teams while simultaneously monitoring the ship's defensive systems. The main status display showed the Defiance's shields at maximum power and weapons systems charging, but Maya could see from the power distribution readings that they were operating at severe disadvantage. "Shun!" Rodriguez called out when he spotted her. "I need you on the sensor analysis station. The aliens are doing something to our systems, power fluctuations are off the charts." Maya slid into the sensor station and immediately began analyzing the incoming data. What she saw made her stomach drop. The careful, methodical scanning they had detected earlier had given way to something far more aggressive. The alien vessel was now actively interfering with the Defiance's systems, causing cascade failures in non-critical components while somehow avoiding the ship's defensive countermeasures. "Chief, they're not trying to destroy us," Maya called out, her voice tight with concentration as she traced the interference patterns. "They're disabling specific systems while leaving life support and basic navigation intact. What's their target priority?" Maya's fingers flew across the control interfaces, following the trail of system failures as they spread through the ship's network. "Weapons first, then shields, then communications. They're systematically removing our ability to fight or call for help while keeping us alive." Rodriguez moved to her station and studied the data over her shoulder. "How are they doing this? Our systems should be isolated from external interference." "I don't think they are isolated," Maya replied grimly. "Remember the scanning activity we detected? I think they downloaded our entire system architecture. They know exactly how everything works and how to exploit vulnerabilities we didn't even know existed." The ship shuddered as something impacted the shields. Through the engineering deck's small viewport, Maya could see the alien vessel approaching a dark, angular shape that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship was even larger than the initial scans had suggested, easily 5 times the mass of the Defiance and bristling with technology that defied easy categorization. "Bridge to engineering," Captain Morrison's voice came through the intercom. "Report on system failures." Rodriguez activated the communication system. "Captain, the aliens are conducting some kind of technological attack. They're systematically disabling our defensive capabilities without causing significant damage to life support or structural integrity. Can you counter it?" Maya looked at the cascade of system failures spreading across her displays and shook her head. Rodriguez saw her expression and answered for both of them. "Negative, sir. They understand our technology better than we do. Every countermeasure we try, they adapt to instantly." The ship shuddered again, and Maya watched as the shield generators finally overloaded and shut down. The Defiance was now completely defenseless, hanging in space like a wounded animal while the alien vessel moved closer with predatory patience. "All hands, prepare for possible boarding action," Morrison announced. "Security teams to defensive positions. Engineering, maintain life support at all costs." Maya continued monitoring the alien interference, hoping to find some pattern or vulnerability she could exploit. But the more she studied their technology, the more impressed and terrified she became. The aliens weren't just more advanced, they operated on entirely different principles. Where human technology relied on brute force and redundant systems, the alien approach was elegant and efficient, achieving the same results with a fraction of the energy expenditure. "Maya," Rodriguez said quietly, "I need you to do something for me." She looked up from her station to see the chief engineer's grave expression. "Sir? I want you to go to Emergency Station 7 and start a complete system backup. Everything: technical specifications, operational procedures, personnel files, mission parameters. If they take the ship, Earth needs to know what we learned." Emergency Station 7 was located in the deepest part of the engineering section, a heavily shielded compartment designed to survive catastrophic ship damage. It contained backup copies of all critical systems and could function independently for up to 72 hours in an emergency. Maya hesitated. "Chief, my duty station is here with the primary engineering team." Rodriguez placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression softening slightly. "Maya, you're the best systems analyst I've ever worked with. If anyone can figure out how to hide data from these aliens, it's you. We need someone in that backup station who can think creatively and adapt to unexpected situations." Maya understood. She was being given the most important assignment of her life, ensuring that humanity learned from this encounter, regardless of what happened to the Defiance and her crew. She nodded and gathered her personal toolkit, knowing she might not see her colleagues again. The journey to Emergency Station 7 took her through sections of the ship she rarely visited. The corridors were filled with security teams moving to defensive positions, their faces set with grim determination. Maya could hear the distant sound of hull plating groaning under stress as the alien vessel drew closer. Emergency Station 7 was exactly as she remembered from her orientation tour, a cramped but fully equipped engineering workspace surrounded by backup data storage systems and emergency supplies. Maya activated the station and began the process of copying the ship's complete database, a procedure that would normally take several hours but which she needed to complete in minutes. As the data transfer progressed, Maya monitored the alien interference patterns through the station's independent sensor array. The aliens had completely disabled the ship's weapons and shields and were now focusing on the navigation and propulsion systems. Within minutes, the Defiance would be completely immobilized. That's when Maya noticed something interesting in the interference patterns. The aliens were incredibly sophisticated in their attacks, but they seemed to have one limitation: they could only interfere with systems they had previously scanned. The emergency station, being heavily shielded and normally offline, had been invisible to their reconnaissance. Maya's mind raced as she considered the implications. If the aliens couldn't affect systems they didn't know about, then perhaps she could hide critical information in places they wouldn't think to look. She began modifying the backup protocols, embedding essential data in seemingly innocuous maintenance logs and calibration files. The ship's intercom crackled to life again. "All hands, we are being boarded. Repeat, alien forces have breached the hull and are proceeding through the ship. All personnel are ordered to offer no resistance and comply with alien directives." Maya's hands trembled as she continued her work. The aliens were aboard, moving through the corridors she had walked just minutes earlier. She could hear distant sounds, not quite footsteps, but something moving with purposeful rhythm through the ship's passages. She embedded the final data packages just as the emergency station's proximity sensors detected movement outside. Maya sealed the backup systems and activated the station's defensive protocols, knowing they wouldn't stop the aliens but hoping they might buy her a few extra seconds. The door to Emergency Station 7 didn't open, it simply ceased to exist. One moment it was a solid barrier of reinforced composite material, the next it was gone, as if it had never been there at all. Maya stared in fascination and terror at the technology that could manipulate matter so casually. The being that entered the station was unlike anything in humanity's xenobiology databases. It stood roughly 3 meters tall on 4 articulated legs that seemed to bend in too many places. Its torso was elongated and covered in what might have been skin or might have been some kind of biological technology. The boundary was impossible to determine. Multiple appendages emerged from its shoulders and sides, each one ending in clusters of manipulator digits that moved with fluid precision. But it was the alien's head that truly unsettled Maya. Where a human would have eyes and mouth, this creature had an array of sensor organs that shifted and reconfigured themselves as they focused on her. She could feel its attention like a physical weight, as if every aspect of her being was being catalogued and analyzed. The alien spoke, though it had no visible mouth. The words appeared directly in Maya's mind, bypassing her ears entirely. "Human Maya Chen, Engineer 3rd Class, Personnel Number 7749. You have been selected for interface." Maya found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Interface? Your species has demonstrated technological competence exceeding our initial projections. Standard assimilation protocols require adjustment. You will provide operational context for human engineering methodologies." The words were clear, but their meaning was terrifying. Assimilation. These aliens weren't interested in communication or cooperation, they wanted to absorb human technology into their own systems, and they needed Maya to help them understand how it worked. "I won't help you attack my people," Maya said, surprised by her own courage. The alien sensor array reconfigured itself, studying her with what might have been amusement. "Attack is an inefficient concept. We collect and preserve functional technologies. Your species will be incorporated into our collective knowledge base. Individual consciousness may be maintained if deemed beneficial to overall functionality." Maya understood now. These weren't conquerors in any traditional sense, they were collectors, treating sentient species like components in some vast technological library. The crew of the Defiance would be studied, catalogued, and preserved like specimens in a museum, their knowledge absorbed and their individuality erased. "What do you want from me specifically?" she asked. "Human engineering methods demonstrate remarkable adaptability despite technological limitations. You will explain the principles underlying this adaptability so that they may be integrated into our collective systems. Maya's mind raced. The alien wanted to understand human creativity and problem-solving abilities, the very qualities that made humanity unique. If she cooperated, she would be helping them develop the tools to assimilate not just Earth, but any other species they encountered. But if she refused, they would simply extract the information by force. She could see other aliens moving through the corridor outside, herding her crewmates toward some unknown fate. Captain Morrison walked past, his face blank with the expression of someone whose will was no longer their own. "I need time to prepare the information you want," Maya said, hoping to buy herself a few minutes to think. The alien's sensor array focused on her again. "Deception is inefficient. The data you require is already present in your neural pathways. Interface will extract necessary information regardless of voluntary cooperation. Then, why ask for my help at all? Voluntary interface produces superior data quality. Cooperative subjects provide contextual information that forced extraction cannot access. You may choose the method of data transfer." Maya realized she was facing an impossible choice. Cooperate and betray humanity's unique nature to these collectors, or resist and have the information taken by force while providing no benefit to her people. Either way, the aliens would get what they wanted. But there was a third option, one that required her to trust in the hidden data packages she had embedded throughout the ship's backup systems. If she could somehow transmit the aliens' technological specifications back to Earth, humanity might have a chance to develop countermeasures before the collectors arrived in force. "I'll cooperate," Maya said finally, "but I need access to my engineering systems to properly explain human problem-solving methods." The alien was silent for several seconds, undoubtedly communicating with others of its kind through methods Maya couldn't detect. Finally, it responded. "Access will be granted under monitored conditions. Deception attempts will result in immediate forced extraction." Maya nodded and moved to the emergency station's primary interface. Her hands shook as she activated the systems, knowing that she was about to gamble not just her own life, but potentially the survival of her entire species. The data she had hidden throughout the ship's systems included detailed scans of the alien interference patterns and power signatures. If she could somehow embed that information in the interface process itself, it might be transmitted back to the collector's ship without them realizing it. From there, it could potentially be recovered and transmitted to Earth. It was a desperate plan with virtually no chance of success, but it was the only option she had. Maya began the interface process, opening her mind to the alien presence while simultaneously trying to hide humanity's greatest secrets within the data stream. The sensation of mental contact was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The alien consciousness was vast and multifaceted, containing fragments of hundreds of assimilated species. She could sense other minds, human and alien alike, trapped within its mental structure, their knowledge and experiences absorbed into the collective. But she could also sense something the alien didn't expect: her own determination to protect her species, even at the cost of her own existence. Maya began feeding her engineering knowledge into the interface, but she carefully selected which information to share and which to withhold. She showed the alien humanity's approach to redundant systems and fault tolerance, but not the creative intuition that made human engineers so adaptable. She demonstrated technical problem-solving methods, but not the emotional drive that pushed humans to find solutions others considered impossible. And, hidden within the stream of technical data, she embedded every piece of information she had gathered about alien technology, encoding it in the same pattern recognition algorithms that had allowed her to detect their scanning in the first place. The alien presence pressed deeper into her mind, seeking the core principles that made human creativity possible. Maya fought to protect those thoughts while maintaining the illusion of cooperation. She could feel her mental defenses weakening under the alien's assault, but she held on just long enough to complete the data transfer. When the interface finally ended, Maya collapsed to the deck of the emergency station, her mind reeling from the contact. The alien stood over her, its sensor array flickering with what might have been satisfaction. Data extraction complete. Human engineering principles have been successfully integrated into collective knowledge base. You will be preserved as a functional component for future reference. Maya tried to speak, but found her voice had been reduced to a whisper. Did you get everything you wanted? All relevant data has been acquired. Your species' technological methodologies will enhance collective efficiency by approximately 12%. The alien moved toward the door, apparently satisfied with the results of the interface. Maya watched it leave, knowing that she had done everything possible to protect humanity's secrets while potentially providing Earth with the intelligence it would need to defend itself. She didn't know if her hidden data packages would reach their destination, or if anyone would be able to decode the information about alien technology she had embedded in the transmission. But she had done her duty as an engineer. She had found a way to solve an impossible problem, even if the solution required sacrificing herself in the process. Maya Chen, the quiet girl nobody paid attention to, had just become humanity's first and, perhaps only hope for survival against the collectors. But whether her desperate gamble would succeed remained to be seen. Maya drifted in and out of consciousness in what the aliens called a preservation chamber, a crystalline pod that maintained her biological functions while keeping her mind accessible for future interrogation. The chamber was translucent, allowing her to observe the transformed interior of the Defiance as the collectors systematically catalogued and absorbed every piece of human technology aboard the ship. Through the hazy barrier of her containment, Maya watched her former crewmates moving through the corridors with the mechanical precision of the assimilated. Their faces showed no emotion, no recognition of their previous lives or relationships. They had become living tools, their individual personalities subsumed into the collective consciousness that now controlled their actions. Captain Morrison walked past her chamber several times, his once commanding presence reduced to that of a biological automaton carrying out tasks assigned by his alien overseers. Maya tried to call out to him, but the preservation chamber muffled her voice to barely a whisper. Even if he could hear her, she wasn't certain there was enough of James Morrison left inside that controlled shell to respond. The alien ship itself defied human comprehension. The collectors had somehow merged their vessel with the Defiance, creating a hybrid structure that incorporated the best aspects of both technologies. Human corridors flowed seamlessly into alien passages, and familiar control interfaces had been integrated with incomprehensible collector systems. It was as if the two ships had become a single organism, each part contributing to the function of the whole. Maya's engineering mind catalogued every detail she could observe, storing the information in the deepest recesses of her memory where the alien interface hadn't penetrated. She had learned during her mental contact with the collector that their assimilation process, while thorough, wasn't perfect. Individual consciousness could survive in fragments, hidden in the spaces between thoughts where the collective presence didn't extend. Over the course of what felt like days but might have been weeks, Maya began to notice patterns in the collector activities. They were methodical in their approach, categorizing human technology according to principles she couldn't fully understand. Some items were absorbed immediately into their collective systems, while others were preserved unchanged for what seemed like future study. More importantly, she began to recognize signs of resistance among the assimilated crew. Subtle variations in movement patterns, microsecond delays in response times, tiny gestures that suggested the remnants of individual personality were still fighting against the collective control. The human mind, it seemed, was more resilient than the collectors had anticipated. Maya's preservation chamber was located in what had once been the ship's main conference room, now transformed into some kind of specimen storage facility. She shared the space with dozens of other containers, each holding examples of various species the collectors had encountered. Some of the beings were clearly dead, preserved for study. Others, like Maya, showed signs of active consciousness despite their containment. It was during one of her periods of forced unconsciousness that Maya first made contact with another resistant mind. The communication came not as words or images, but as pure thought transmitted through what she later realized was the quantum entanglement field that connected all the preservation chambers. Human engineer. You maintain individual cognitive patterns despite assimilation attempts. This is unexpected. The mental voice belonged to something that had once been part of a species called the Vorth, a race of silicon-based entities that had been collected nearly a century earlier according to the knowledge that came with the communication. The Vorth consciousness had maintained its individuality through a combination of distributed thinking and cognitive camouflage, hiding its true thoughts within layers of apparent compliance. How is this possible? Maya responded, surprised to discover she could project her thoughts through the same quantum field. The collectors understand individual consciousness in mathematical terms, as patterns of neural activity that can be mapped and controlled. But consciousness is more than mathematics. It includes elements they cannot quantify: creativity, emotion, the irrational human capacity for hope. These aspects can be hidden if one knows how. Over the following days, the fourth entity, who called itself Architect Krevel, taught Maya techniques for concealing her thoughts and maintaining her identity despite the collector's mental intrusions. She learned to layer her consciousness, presenting surface thoughts that satisfied the alien probes while keeping her true self hidden in deeper mental structures. More importantly, Krevel introduced her to a network of resistant minds throughout the collectorship. Species from across the galaxy had maintained fragments of their individual consciousness, creating a hidden community of the unassimilated. Some had been fighting the collectors for decades, learning their weaknesses and developing countermeasures. Maya discovered that her own resistance was stronger than most. Human cognitive patterns, it seemed, were particularly difficult for the collectors to fully assimilate. The chaotic, intuitive nature of human thought created interference patterns that disrupted the collective's control mechanisms. This was why the alien had been so interested in understanding human engineering principles. They needed to solve the problem of human mental resistance before they could successfully assimilate Earth. Your species represents a significant threat to the collective, Krevel explained during one of their hidden conversations. Every human they assimilate reduces the efficiency of their control network. They cannot afford to ignore your home world, but they also cannot safely absorb your people without first understanding how to overcome your mental resilience. Maya realized that her interface with the collector hadn't been as successful as they had believed. While they had extracted technical information about human engineering, they had failed to understand the underlying cognitive processes that made human creativity possible. Her resistance proved that human consciousness operated on principles they couldn't fully comprehend or control. This gave her hope, but it also created urgency. If the collectors couldn't assimilate humans effectively, they would eventually resort to extermination rather than absorption. Earth needed to know about the threat and prepare defenses before the collectors arrived in force. The data packages you embedded in the transmission, Krevel said when Maya explained her desperate gambit. Do you believe they reached their destination? I don't know. The transmission was encoded in our own sensor protocols, hidden within routine telemetry data. If the collectors detected it, they would have prevented its transmission. But, if it got through, then, your species might have the intelligence they need to develop countermeasures. Maya spent the following days working with the resistance network to analyze everything they knew about collector technology and tactics. The accumulated knowledge of dozens of assimilated species created a comprehensive picture of the collective's capabilities and limitations. The collectors were indeed ancient and powerful, but they weren't invulnerable. Their technology depended on quantum manipulation and matter reconstruction, essentially the same principles that had allowed them to dissolve the door to Emergency Station 7. But these abilities required enormous amounts of energy and precise calculation. Large-scale operations like fleet actions or planetary assaults strained their resources and created opportunities for resistance. More importantly, the collective's distributed consciousness was both its greatest strength and its most significant vulnerability. The network that connected all assimilated minds also provided a pathway for introducing disruptive information or cognitive viruses that could spread throughout the collective. Every species we have absorbed contributes something to the collective knowledge base, explained another resistant mind, a being from a race called the Hegemony that had been collected 50 years earlier. But the integration process also introduces vulnerabilities. Human cognitive patterns are particularly disruptive because they don't follow logical pathways that the collective can predict. Maya began to understand why her own resistance had been so effective. The same chaotic intuition that made human engineering so adaptable also made human consciousness difficult to control. The collectors had assumed that advanced intelligence required logical, predictable thought patterns. Human creativity defied this assumption. If we could somehow amplify the disruptive effects of human consciousness, Maya suggested, could we destabilize the entire collective network? Krevel was silent for several moments before responding. Theoretically, yes. But it would require introducing human cognitive patterns into the collective in a way that appears beneficial rather than threatening. The patterns would need to spread throughout the network before their disruptive effects became apparent. Maya's engineering mind immediately began working on the problem. She needed to find a way to disguise human creativity as something the collectors would want to integrate, then use that integration to introduce a virus into their collective consciousness. The solution came to her during another forced interface session. The collector was attempting to extract additional information about human problem-solving methods, probing deeper into her memories of engineering challenges she had solved aboard the Defiance. Maya realized she could use this process to her advantage. Instead of resisting the mental intrusion, Maya began actively feeding the collector examples of human creativity, but not the straightforward technical solutions it expected. She shared memories of intuitive leaps, emotional insights, and irrational decisions that had somehow led to successful outcomes. She showed the alien her process of solving problems through trial and error, making mistakes and learning from them rather than following predetermined logical pathways. The collector absorbed this information eagerly, believing it was gaining valuable insights into human adaptability. But what it was actually receiving was a cognitive virus's patterns of thought that defied logical analysis and created cascading uncertainties in any system that tried to process them. Maya could sense the effects beginning almost immediately. The collector's mental presence became less focused, its communications more fragmented. The alien was trying to integrate human irrationality into its logical framework, but the two approaches were fundamentally incompatible. "What are you doing?" Krival asked, sensing the disturbance in the collective network. "Teaching them to think like humans," Maya replied. "They wanted to understand our creativity, so I'm showing them what it really means. They're trying to process intuition through pure logic, and it's breaking their thought patterns." The effects spread slowly through the collective network as the collector shared Maya's insights with other nodes. Each attempt to analyze and categorize human irrationality created new inconsistencies and processing errors. The collective's perfect logical unity was being contaminated by human chaos. Maya could see the confusion spreading through the assimilated crew members. Their movements became less coordinated, their responses slower and more uncertain. Some of them began showing flickers of individual expression, brief moments when their original personalities broke through the collective control. Captain Morrison paused outside her chamber, his face twisted in confusion as conflicting instructions from the collective created a feedback loop in his modified consciousness. For just an instant, Maya saw recognition in his eyes, a flash of the man he had been before the assimilation. "The network is destabilizing," reported another resistant mind. "The collective is attempting to isolate the contaminated nodes, but the disruptive patterns have already spread too far." Maya realized this was their opportunity. If the resistance network acted now, while the collective was weakened by the cognitive virus, they might be able to break free of their containment and potentially escape to warn their respective homeworlds. "How do we break out of these preservation chambers?" Maya asked. "The containment fields are controlled by the ship's central consciousness," Krival explained. "But if that consciousness is sufficiently disrupted by your cognitive virus, the control systems might become vulnerable to override." Maya began concentrating on the preservation chamber's control interfaces, using the same intuitive problem-solving approach she had shared with the collector. Instead of trying to understand the alien technology logically, she simply experimented with different input combinations, following her instincts rather than any systematic analysis. The chamber's quantum field fluctuated as her chaotic approach introduced unexpected variables into its control systems. The same cognitive virus that was disrupting the collective network also affected the technology they had created, causing malfunctions and system failures throughout the ship. Maya's preservation chamber dissolved around her, the quantum field collapsed, dropping her unceremoniously onto the deck plates. Around the converted conference room, other containers were failing as well, releasing confused and disoriented beings from dozens of different species. The ship's hybrid human-alien corridors were filled with alarms and flashing emergency lights as the collective struggled to contain the spreading chaos. Assimilated crew members wandered aimlessly, their connection to the collective severed or corrupted by the cognitive virus. Maya stumbled toward what had once been the ship's emergency communication array, hoping to find some way to transmit a warning to Earth. The alien modifications had transformed the familiar equipment into something almost unrecognizable, but the underlying human engineering was still present beneath the collector technology. She began working on the communication systems with desperate urgency, knowing that the collective would eventually find a way to purge the cognitive virus from their network. This window of opportunity might be their only chance to send a message that could save both Earth and the other worlds threatened by the collectors. But, as Maya struggled with the hybrid controls, she realized that escaping the ship might not be enough. The collectors had absorbed too much human technology and knowledge to be stopped by conventional means. Earth needed something more than just a warning. They needed a weapon that could exploit the fundamental vulnerabilities she had discovered in the collective consciousness. Maya Chen, the quiet engineer who nobody had paid attention to, was about to become the architect of humanity's greatest strategic advantage in a war they didn't even know they were fighting. The communication array that Maya frantically worked to repair existed in a state of technological schizophrenia. Human components had been grafted with collector systems in ways that defied both engineering logic and aesthetic sensibility. Crystalline structures pulsed with bioelectric energy alongside familiar plasma conduits, while quantum processors attempted to interface with simple digital circuits through connection methods that shouldn't have been possible. Maya's hands moved across the hybrid controls with desperate precision, her engineering instincts adapting to the alien modifications even as her rational mind struggled to understand them. The cognitive virus she had introduced into the collective network was spreading throughout the ship's systems, creating windows of vulnerability in the collector technology that she could exploit. Around her, the chaos continued to escalate. Freed resistance members from various species were attempting to reach their own emergency protocols, while confused assimilated crew members wandered the corridors in states of increasing agitation. The collective's perfect coordination was disintegrating as human irrationality corrupted their logical frameworks. Captain Morrison appeared in the communication center, his face cycling through expressions of confusion, recognition, and alien control as different parts of his modified consciousness fought for dominance. Maya could see him struggling against the collective's influence, brief moments of his original personality breaking through the mental conditioning. "Maya," he said, his voice shifting between his familiar command tone and the flat effect of the assimilated. "The ship, something's wrong with the ship. I remember, we were exploring. There was a derelict." His eyes focused on her with painful clarity for just an instant. "Did we find them, or did they find us?" Before Maya could respond, Morrison's expression went blank again as the collective reasserted control. He turned and walked away, leaving Maya alone with the hybrid communication systems and the growing certainty that she was running out of time. The quantum field generators that powered the collector technology were beginning to stabilize as the aliens developed countermeasures for the cognitive virus. Maya could see their adaptation process in the ship's status displays, logical frameworks being rewritten to contain and isolate the human irrationality that was disrupting their systems. She managed to establish a connection with the erased transmission systems just as Architect Kreval's mental voice reached her through the quantum entanglement field. "Human Maya, the collective is regaining control. You have perhaps minutes before they purge the virus from their network entirely. How long will it take them to repair the damage?" Maya asked while simultaneously trying to encode her message for transmission to Earth. "Unknown. We have never seen them encounter a disruption of this magnitude. They may require significant time to develop new control protocols, or they may simply destroy all contaminated nodes and begin again with fresh subjects." Maya understood the implication. If the collective chose the second option, everyone aboard the ship, human and alien resistance members alike, would be eliminated to prevent further contamination. She had to get her message transmitted before that happened. The communication array finally responded to her commands, but the hybrid nature of the system presented new challenges. The collector modifications had increased the transmission range exponentially, making it possible to send signals across interstellar distances almost instantaneously. But the same modifications also made the system incredibly complex, requiring precise calibration to prevent the message from being scattered across multiple dimensions. Maya began encoding her transmission using a combination of human communication protocols and the alien techniques she had observed during her time in captivity. The message itself was massive, detailed specifications of collector technology, tactical assessments of their capabilities, analysis of their psychological and technological vulnerabilities, and, most importantly, the complete algorithm for the cognitive virus that could disrupt their collective consciousness. But Maya realized that simply transmitting technical data wouldn't be enough. Earth needed to understand not just how to fight the collectors, but why humanity's unique approach to consciousness made them particularly effective against this enemy. She needed to explain the deeper principles behind human creativity and irrationality that could be weaponized against a species that valued logical perfection above all else. As she worked on the transmission, Maya became aware of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple sets of feet moving with the synchronized precision of the collective, accompanied by the subtle harmonic vibrations that indicated collector presence. They had traced the source of the system disruptions to the communication center. Maya's fingers flew across the control interfaces as she completed the final encoding sequences. The transmission was ready, but she needed just 30 more seconds to upload the complete package to Earth. The footsteps were getting closer. 25 seconds. The first collector appeared in the doorway, the same alien entity that had conducted Maya's initial interface. Its sensor array was flickering with patterns she now recognized as extreme agitation. Behind it came Captain Morrison and several other assimilated crew members, their faces showing the blank expressions of complete collective control. 20 seconds. Human Maya Chen, the collector's mental voice was sharp with anger. Your introduction of chaotic cognitive patterns has damaged collective efficiency by 37%. You will submit to immediate neural restructuring to prevent further contamination. Maya ignored the alien and continued working on the transmission. The upload progress indicator showed 85% complete. 15 seconds. The collector extended one of its manipulator appendages toward Maya, the tip glowing with the quantum energy it used to interface with biological nervous systems. But, before it could make contact, Captain Morrison stepped between them. "Belay that order," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of command despite the circumstances. For a moment, James Morrison was himself again, fighting through the collective's control through sheer force of will. 10 seconds. The collector's attention shifted to Morrison, trying to reassert control over his modified consciousness. Maya could see the struggle playing out in the captain's face as two incompatible sets of mental commands battled for dominance. 5 seconds. Morrison's resistance gave Maya just enough time to complete the transmission. The communication array discharged its accumulated energy in a brilliant flash that temporarily overloaded the lighting systems throughout the ship. Across interstellar space, humanity's salvation was racing toward Earth at faster than light speeds. 0. The collector finally overwhelmed Morrison's defenses, reducing him to an empty shell once again. But the damage was done. The transmission was complete, and Maya had accomplished her mission despite the impossible odds. "Transmission successful," Maya said, slumping back in her chair with exhaustion and relief. "Earth now has everything they need to defeat you." The collector's sensor array focused on her with what might have been respect. "Your species continues to exceed our analytical projections. The probability of successful resistance under these conditions was calculated at less than 2%. "You miscalculated because you don't understand what makes us human," Maya replied. "You tried to quantify creativity and measure intuition, but some things can't be reduced to mathematical formulas. This resistance will be analyzed and countered. Your cognitive virus will be purged from our systems, and improved control protocols will be developed. Your species assimilation will proceed as planned." Maya smiled, knowing something the collector didn't. "You can purge the virus from your current systems, but you can't unlearn what you've already absorbed about human consciousness. Every time you encounter another human, you'll have to deal with the same cognitive chaos that's disrupting your network right now. You've made yourselves vulnerable to us." The collector was silent for several seconds, processing the implications of Maya's statement. The alien was beginning to understand that the interface process worked both ways. While they had gained knowledge about human technology, they had also been contaminated by human thought patterns that were fundamentally incompatible with their collective consciousness. "Your species presents an unacceptable risk to collective stability," the collector finally admitted. "Assimilation protocols will be abandoned in favor of elimination directives." Maya felt a chill as she realized the full consequences of her actions. By making humans impossible to assimilate safely, she had ensured that the collectors would attempt to destroy Earth entirely rather than risk further contamination of their network. But she had also given humanity the tools they needed to fight back. The transmission included not just technical specifications and tactical analysis, but the complete methodology for creating cognitive viruses that could turn the Collector's greatest strength into their most critical vulnerability. Earth would have to choose between surrender and a war against an enemy with vastly superior technology. But, for the first time, they would have weapons that could actually hurt the Collectors, weapons based on the chaotic, illogical, beautifully human approach to consciousness that Maya had spent her life trying to suppress. The irony wasn't lost on her. Maya Chen, who had always valued logic and precision over creativity and intuition, had discovered that humanity's greatest strength lay not in what made them similar to other species, but in what made them uniquely, irrationally, magnificently human. The Collector moved toward her again, but this time Maya didn't resist. She had done everything possible to save her species. Whether Earth could use the information she had provided would depend on people far more important and influential than a quiet engineer who had never learned how to be the center of attention. But, as the alien's quantum interface prepared to restructure her consciousness permanently, Maya allowed herself a moment of pride. She had solved the most complex engineering problem of her life: how to transform human weakness into a weapon capable of threatening an ancient galactic empire. The solution hadn't come from textbooks or technical manuals or logical analysis. It had come from embracing the very qualities she had spent years trying to control: creativity, intuition, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that some problems were impossible to solve. Maya Chen had finally learned what it meant to be gloriously, chaotically, effectively human. And she had transmitted that knowledge across the stars to ensure that her species would never forget it. The Collector's interface began the process of permanent neural restructuring, but Maya faced it without fear. She had done her duty as an engineer, as a human being, and as Earth's first line of defense against an enemy that understood everything about technology and nothing about the heart. Her last conscious thought was a prayer that someone would pay attention to the quiet girl's final message, and that humanity would prove worthy of the sacrifice she and her crewmates had made. The transmission was complete. Now the real battle could begin. 3 months after Maya Chen's transmission reached Earth, the recording of her final stand was broadcast simultaneously across every communication network in human space. The woman who had spent her life avoiding attention became the most famous person in human history, her voice echoing through the corridors of ships, the halls of government buildings, and the homes of 8 billion people who suddenly understood that their existence hung in the balance. Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation to Maya, though she would spend the rest of her life wishing otherwise, stood before the emergency session of the Unified Earth Council, the engineer's final transmission playing on screens around the chamber. The recording showed everything: Maya's desperate struggle in the communication center, her defiant words to the Collector, and the moment of brilliant inspiration that had turned human consciousness into a weapon. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Chen said as the recording ended, "Engineer Third Class Maya Chen has given us the key to humanity's survival. But she's also shown us that the threat we face is beyond anything we've ever imagined." The council chamber was filled with the representatives of Earth's various nations and colonies, people who had spent their careers debating trade agreements and territorial disputes. Now they faced a decision that would determine whether their species survived the next decade. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, stood to address the assembly. The cognitive virus that Engineer Chen developed isn't just a weapon, it's a fundamental redefinition of how we understand consciousness itself. The Collectors operate on the assumption that advanced intelligence requires logical, predictable thought patterns. Human creativity breaks that assumption. "But, can we weaponize it?" asked Premier Liu of the Asian Federation. Chen's recording shows that the virus worked against a single ship, but the Collectors control thousands of vessels across the galaxy. Admiral Chen activated a holographic display showing the tactical analysis Maya had transmitted along with her personal recording. According to Engineer Chen's data, the Collectors' collective consciousness is their greatest vulnerability. If we can introduce the cognitive virus into their primary network, it could cascade throughout their entire civilization. The scope of what they were proposing was staggering. Humanity would need to develop new technologies based on alien principles they barely understood, create weapons that operated on psychological rather than physical laws, and somehow deploy them against an enemy that had been conquering galaxies for millennia. But Maya's recording had done more than provide technical specifications. It had shown the galaxy something that no amount of propaganda could have achieved: the true nature of human courage. In 18 different languages, her words echoed across Allied space. "You miscalculated because you don't understand what makes us human." The response was immediate and unprecedented. The Altarian Republic, humanity's oldest alien ally, committed their entire fleet to the defense of Earth. The Vegan Trade Consortium offered their most advanced manufacturing facilities for weapon production. Even species that had never had formal contact with humans sent messages of support and offers of assistance. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the brilliant quantum engineer who would later be called the architect of humanity's victory, had spent months analyzing Maya's technical data. The cognitive virus works because human consciousness operates on quantum principles that the collectors can't predict, she explained to the assembled council. "We think in probability clouds rather than fixed logical paths. Our creativity comes from quantum uncertainty at the neural level." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked President Jackson of the North American Union. "It means we can build weapons that think," Tanaka replied. "Quantum computers programmed with human cognitive patterns that can evolve and adapt faster than the collectors can counter them. Ships that operate on intuition rather than programming. Soldiers who are stronger because they don't know they should be afraid." The development program that followed Maya's transmission became the largest engineering project in human history. Entire worlds were converted to research facilities. The best minds from a dozen species worked together to understand and implement the principles that a quiet engineer had discovered through sheer desperation. But perhaps the most important development wasn't technological at all. Maya's recording had shown the galaxy that humans didn't just fight for survival, they fought for each other. Her willingness to sacrifice herself for people she barely knew, her determination to save a species that had never fully appreciated her contributions, became a symbol that transcended cultural and species boundaries. The hegemony remnant, survivors of one of the species the collectors had assimilated centuries earlier, sent a message that was broadcast throughout Allied space: "We have waited 700 years for someone to show us that resistance was possible. The human engineer Maya Chen has given us hope where we thought none existed." On Earth, Maya's hometown of Shanghai erected a monument in her honor, but the inscription wasn't about her technical achievements or her heroic sacrifice. Instead, it read, "To Maya Chen, who taught us that being unremarkable is the most remarkable thing of all." Children across human space learned her story in school, but they also learned something more important: that heroism didn't require fame or recognition or social skills. It just required doing what needed to be done, regardless of the personal cost. 6 months after Maya's transmission, the first human ships equipped with cognitive virus weapons departed for the Kepler sector. They were crewed by volunteers who understood that they might not survive the mission, but who also understood that failure meant the extinction of everything they held dear. The battle for humanity's survival would be fought with weapons that operated on principles Maya had discovered: quantum computers that embraced uncertainty, defensive systems that adapted through creative problem-solving, and tactics that succeeded precisely because they were too irrational for the collectors to predict. But perhaps the most powerful weapon humanity deployed was the recording itself. Maya's 37-minute transmission was encoded into every human military communication system, ready to be broadcast at maximum power if the cognitive virus weapons failed. The collectors had learned to isolate and contain individual cognitive disruptions, but they couldn't defend against an entire species simultaneously embracing the chaotic creativity that Maya had demonstrated. If necessary, 8 billion humans would become a living cognitive virus, their collective consciousness so disruptive to collector logic that the aliens would have no choice but to withdraw or face the complete breakdown of their collective network. The final confrontation came at the edge of the Kepler sector, where a collector fleet of 300 vessels waited in perfect formation. The human task force that met them consisted of only 40 ships, but each one carried weapons that the collectors couldn't understand or counter. Admiral Elizabeth Kane, commanding from the flagship UES Defiance, named in honor of Maya's ship, broadcast a message to the collector fleet as they approached: "We are the species you tried to assimilate and failed. We are the chaos that breaks your order, the uncertainty that defeats your logic. We are human." The battle that followed lasted 17 minutes and became known throughout the galaxy as the Moment of Silence, the first time in recorded history that the collectors had retreated rather than face an enemy. The quantum cognitive virus weapons performed exactly as Maya's specifications had predicted. As each collector ship was infected, its perfect logical systems became contaminated with human irrationality, creating cascade failures throughout their network. Ships that had operated in perfect coordination for millennia began making independent decisions, developing individual personalities, even questioning the fundamental premises of their collective existence. The collector fleet withdrew, not because they were defeated, but because they were becoming human. Years later, as humanity took its place as a major power in galactic politics, Maya Chen's recording was still being studied by xenopsychologists and military strategists. But its greatest impact wasn't on science or warfare, it was on how the galaxy understood consciousness itself. The quiet engineer who had never learned to speak up in meetings had given the universe a new definition of intelligence. Not the cold logic of perfection, but the warm chaos of creativity. Not the predictability of programming, but the beautiful uncertainty of intuition. Maya's recording ended with her final words to the collector: "You can purge the virus from your current systems, but you can't unlearn what you've already absorbed about human consciousness." She had been right in ways she couldn't have imagined. The collectors had withdrawn not just from human space, but from active conquest entirely. Their encounter with humanity had introduced them to concepts they couldn't assimilate or eliminate: doubt, creativity, the possibility that their perfect logic might be flawed. Some collector ships had gone rogue entirely, their crews developing individual consciousness and choosing to live as independent beings rather than components in a collective network. They sought out human space, not as conquerors but as refugees, hoping to learn how to embrace the chaotic freedom that Maya's cognitive virus had shown them was possible. The woman who had never wanted to be noticed had become the most influential human who ever lived. Her technical specifications had saved humanity, but her demonstration of human courage and creativity had changed the fundamental nature of consciousness throughout the galaxy. On the anniversary of the Battle of Kepler Sector, Earth observes Maya Chen Day, a celebration of the quiet heroes who solve impossible problems not through recognition or reward, but simply because the work needs to be done. Children throughout human space learn her story, but they also learn the lesson she embodied: that the greatest strength comes not from being perfect, but from being perfectly human. The galaxy had finally paid attention to the quiet girl, and, in doing so, had learned what it truly means to be alive in a universe where consciousness isn't a mathematical formula, but a beautiful, chaotic, magnificently unpredictable gift. Maya Chen had given humanity the stars, but she had given the universe something even more precious: the knowledge that intelligence without creativity is not intelligence at all, and that the species that survives is not the one that computes the best solutions, but the one that dreams of impossible problems worth solving. Her recording plays on, transmitted across the stars, a reminder that sometimes the most important voices are the ones that speak quietly until the moment when the galaxy needs to hear them most.